Welcome. I'm Bev Hutney, Director of Innovation and Research at the Stelter Company, and I am delighted you could join us today to learn the results of our latest piece of research. As most of you know, because we have many of our clients on the call today, Stelter works with hundreds of nonprofits around the country, and we have a group of really brilliant, creative people, strategists, consultants, who we help by making regular investments in research, because we have come to realize that data-driven decisions, recommendations based on evidence, can be very powerful when combined with the ideas of people like you and those of us on our creative teams. And so today, we have brought Ann Selzer, president of Selzer & Company, who conducted our latest piece of research on planned giving. And we're actually catching Ann at a fascinating time here, just a couple of days post-election, because Ann is well known for her highly visible work in the area of election polling. And not only does she do election polling, she also does polling for Bloomberg News. She does an incredible amount of strategic research for nonprofits, particularly in the area of audience development for nonprofits and educational institutions. So the interesting thing about Ann is that just last Saturday, if you were following the polling, our final Iowa poll, which Ann completed, showed that Obama was up by 5 points. Everyone thought it would be a much closer race, and in the final results, he indeed won the state by 5.6 points. And it's this ability to be accurate in her work that has elevated Ann as one of the top pollsters in the country for accuracy. So again, we're just delighted that she could be here, and with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Ann.
Well, hello everybody, and I'm happy to be here, and it's always a pleasure to work with Stelter, always happy to talk about the research that we've done. You know, Bev, you've heard me say many times that the best news that research can ever deliver is the truth. And the reason is that ultimately you're going to make decisions based on the data, and if your data is wobbly, then the decisions that come out of that data can't really be trusted. And nobody knows this better than public opinion pollsters. You know, we show our work to the world ahead of a real-life event that will either confirm or deny what we're saying is true. So we have to have a method that we trust. And some years that's kind of scary. We take flack every time we publish a poll. And there's a certain amount of flack we're always going to take. And some years it's a little flackier, shall we say. But our favorite day is the day after an election, and we find out if we are golden or if we're a goat. And we prefer to be golden. And this year, you know, we feel pretty good. So I'd like to, with that little preface, I'd like to talk about the work that we did for you just earlier this year, the same methodology that we would use for any of our clients that way. The purpose, the people that we surveyed wanted to take a look at people who were likely donors or people who had already made a planned gift. So every U.S. resident was eligible to participate in this poll if they were age 40 or over. And we've done some work looking at 30 and over. We really think that we get the best bang for our buck taking a look at people who are into their careers, making some of these decisions. So our survey is based on a cross-sample of everyone age 40 and over. And again, to get into our survey, they had to say that they currently had a planned gift in place. And that could have been a bequest, it could have been some other vehicle. The people who already had made that decision and executed it. We also wanted to take a look at people who said they planned to put a planned gift in place. That is, offered the opportunity, did they say they would definitely or probably make a planned gift in the future. They've not executed on that attitude, but they are of the frame of mind that says, this is something that I want to do. So you can think about these as people who are in the pipeline. They're psychologically ready to make this kind of decision, so useful to know who they are. These were personal interviews over landline and cell phones, and they lasted approximately 15 minutes, and this was done in June of this year. Our sample size was 401, I think, 401. And that the reason that we choose this, you can see in this chart, kind of explains why. That is, the larger the number of interviews you complete, the lower your margin of error. But you can see that there becomes a point of diminishing returns. So if you're at 100 interviews, well, that's a pretty high margin of error at 9.8. If you double that to 200, that drops rather dramatically to 6.9. But you can see by the time you get to 400, you have a margin of error plus or minus 4.9 percentage points, but that line begins to flatten out. So we feel good about that margin of error, especially for a difficult-to-reach group like planned givers and good prospects. So I want to walk you through what we learned by way of the demographics of these groups and how these two groups differ. So if you look at the age cohorts for people who currently have a planned gift in place, it looks roughly equal across decades. So you have about 1 in 5 who are in their 40s, about 1 in 4 in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. There isn't really a lot of distribution there by way of age. When you look at that distribution for prospects, that is people who say they will definitely or probably put a planned gift in place, you see that they're clustered in the younger age cohorts. So 72% of them are under age 60, and then fewer of them are older, most likely because by the time they're older, they will have executed on that wish. So this is just saying it's still in the wish stage for that younger group of cohorts. Income, we see not that much of a difference. Yes, you see a little bit higher income in the 150,000 a year plus. There's 21% of people who have already put a planned gift in place are in that high income bracket, and that's smaller for planned givers. But you're really seeing a pretty similar income distribution, meaning that people who are good prospects who haven't yet put these in place are still income-wise looking very similar to people who've already executed that idea. When we look at marital status, this looks a lot like pretty much the way the country looks, with 65% of people who put planned gifts in place being married. Among prospects, what you see is a little bit different. They're less likely to be married. They're more likely to be single. What does that mean? It means that you have a higher propensity of people who put planned gifts in place to be married. It's a majority of people who are good prospects too. But you're seeing that if you are ignoring single people, you're missing some good bang for your buck. It is that there's a strong interest, a stronger than average interest among people who are not married, and so worthy, and for reasons that we're going to show you a little bit later, worthy of some cultivation. So where do they live? This is people who currently have planned gifts already in place, and you can see regionally how that looks. How does that compare to people who are prospects? Well, in the West, it's a similar proportion, so that looks about even. In the Midwest, you'll see that prospects are, in fact, a little lighter. That is, in the Midwest, you're more likely to have put a planned gift in place than you are to wish that you had a planned gift. Northeast, about even, and in the South, this looks like a riper opportunity, slightly, for mining prospects. That is, among the whole group of current givers and prospects, it's tilted a bit more to being a rich minefield for prospects. So how do these planned gifts get put in place? One of the things we wanted to see is the relationship between people and the donations they've made to a nonprofit before they executed a planned gift. We wanted to know how long had they been giving. Conventional wisdom says the longer somebody has been engaged with a nonprofit, the more likely it is that they will be receptive to the idea of making a planned gift. And you can see from this chart, just based on people who have a planned gift in place, that the majority, 57%, had been giving to a nonprofit on an annual basis for 5 years or more. But what that means is that there are a lot of people who have been giving fewer years than that. And I think one of the surprising things from this study is the 21% of people who have a planned gift in place saying they had never given an annual gift to a nonprofit. And it isn't that 21% that you should drop everything you're doing with your long-term donors, but it says to you that there may be people who are invisible to you. They're not on your rolls in terms of people who are giving gifts, but they have put a planned gift in place. So finding ways of communicating and having requests go broader than just the people who've been long-term givers, that may bear fruit for you. In all, 41% gave for less than 5 years. 41%, that's a substantial proportion. What about the size of gifts? Among people, so we're going to take that 21% out. So just looking at the people who've given gifts, how much are they giving before they put a planned gift in place? And you can see on the left side of this pie that people who've given $1,000 or more is a substantial part of what's happening in terms of that. But you also have 43% of people who have put a planned gift in place and have given money to that charity. They've given an average of less than $500 a year. It just says that there's if you're segmenting your list in terms of your highest donors, that's going to pay off for you. We're not saying that, but there's opportunity on the part of your list that you may be giving shorter shrift to. One of the things we wanted to know was how quickly do people move from having the intention to put a planned gift in place to finalizing those documents, to executing that gift. A majority say that takes less than a year. And the rest of that sort of peters out over subsequent years. But I think what that says is this is a swift acting group of people, that once they are of the mind to do it, there's a very quick turnaround, and it just means your nonprofits should be ready, that once people are ready to go, they're ready to go. So any help that you give them needs to be swift. We also wanted to know if they are likely to make additional planned gifts. Again, this is just people who already have a planned gift in place. Almost 3 out of 4 say no. They don't intend to make any additional gifts. 10% are already of the mindset that they're going to make more gifts to other charities. 12% think they might put other gifts in place for the charities they already support. And this chart shows probably more than any other why it's important to look at prospects, because these are people saying to you that their psychological mindset is they're done. They've put a planned gift in place, but they don't intend to do more. So you have to be looking at the pipeline, that is people who are of the mindset but haven't yet acted, because there's not a huge amount of activity yet to come from the people who already put those planned gifts in place. We're always interested in whether people are telling what's happening with planned giving. So we first want to know, if you have children, and 68% of planned givers do, have you told them about your intent? Yes, 81% say they have told their children, and that's already in place. Well, what about telling the charities who are named in your planned gift? 49% say, I don't intend to tell them. 49% say, I've already told them, or I will at some point. So it's always part of your life, and this is intriguing to me, that a lot of what you do remains a mystery. You may not know what the good work that you've done and your ability to be effective, because the people who are acting in your best interest aren't telling you necessarily that. We want to find out as much as we can about how to influence the decisions that people are making. So we wanted to take a look at who are the influencers, asking, did you engage with any of these types of people in taking a look at deciding to make a planned gift? So this is just, was this a major influence for you or no? And most noticeably, the 40% saying, I've made this decision on my own. I came up with the decision, I wasn't really influenced. But among where there is influence, family members, the biggest influence of 25% saying this was a major influencer. A friend, 16. Staff members at a charity, about the same. Getting print or electronic communication from the charity, about the same. Tax advisors, attorneys, a board member at a charity, or some other. And I think what this says to you is that that people could have answered multiple of these, and that there still isn't a lot of recognition that there's strong influencers on this decision. But to the extent that there is influence, the top of that chart are family members, friends, and the charities themselves that are entering into that. It's not to say that tax advisors and attorneys aren't important. They may be important to a smaller group of people. So it isn't to say they have less influence. It's that they influence fewer people than are being influenced by family. Because they could answer multiple answers here with this question, we came back around and said, well, what was the most important influence on you? And the rank order looks exactly the same. So this chart tells you everything you need to know about where people are influencing that decision. We were curious about life transitions because we hear that that's important in people deciding to make a will. What does that do when people are deciding to make a planned gift? And the 64% bar at the bottom of that chart says almost 2 out of 3 say none of these things that we tested, and these are the only 4 things we tested, said that that made a difference. But the most commonly, when there's a death in the family, that's a time that a will would get either made or reviewed, and changes might be there. Inheritance or windfall less, births, job changes a little bit less. So this is some way kind of just trying to say, here we have conventional wisdom, what's the reality, and people saying this is how we're putting these decisions in place. We were interested in finding out how people with planned gifts relate to the nonprofits that they are supporting with those planned gifts. So we wanted to know, well, what's the nature of the communication that you're getting? How would you rate the attention that you receive from the charities you support or plan to support? So this includes the prospects here. 37% say they would consider the attention they get excellent. Another 35% say good, 13% just fair, 5% poor, and 10% not sure. Now, 37%, that's the kind of number when we show it to a client, regardless of what we might be asking. They say, well, is that a big number or a small number? And the reality is, when we've done customer service work with many, many types of customers, anything that's asking for this kind of rating, we think that a good rule of thumb is to say, if you have half of your audience giving you an excellent rating, that is the highest rating they can give, if you're not there, that's a goal to shoot for. If you surpass that, good for you, because that is a meaningful number to get to half. 37, shy of half. But let's take a look at how that breaks by particular groups. You'll see that number is higher among women than among men. It's higher among married people than among people who are unmarried. And again, this is one of the things that we take a look at and say, gee, if you're more likely than average to be a good prospect, if you are unmarried, but you're giving lower ratings for the quality of attention that you're getting, that to us is an opportunity. There's a little bit of a gap, but there's higher potential than average with that group, but lower ratings for the engagement that they're having with their nonprofits. Higher income households give higher ratings than lower income households, and people who have revealed their gift to the charity, they're well above that 50% mark that I said is a good benchmark. They're at 62%, saying that the attention they get is excellent. So I would think that's meaningful now. What's the cause and what's the effect? I mean, because they were getting excellent attention, they put a planned gift in place, or because they put a planned gift in place, it changed the quality of the engagement they feel with that charity. Either way, there's a bit of a lesson to be learned there in terms of really thinking about the quality of the way you engage with your donors and potential donors. Always interested in what people want in terms of communication from the nonprofits and the charities that we support. So we said, what additional type of communication would be welcome? And you can look at this chart and see that 54% say neither, and that can be kind of a demoralizing moment, I suppose. To the extent, and I'll come back to that in a second, but to the extent that those who say they would welcome additional communication, 24% say I would prefer that to be written, 12% say I would prefer that to be in person, and 5% say both would be welcome. And I think the way to think about this is it is certainly a bit of the psychological mindset these days, that we are in an information-rich, marketing-overloaded society, and a lot of people are bombarded by messages they didn't invite. So we say, well, what would you invite? It's not terribly surprising that 54% would say, really, thanks, but no thanks. And so as you're thinking about what to do with it, I don't think this is a request that you necessarily respect, because if you just remain silent, you're not really helping yourself. But it does say the quality of how you communicate is going to matter, because this is signaling there's just an overload, and for you to break through, it's going to need to be quality messages that do that. The group most likely to say neither are the oldest people in our demographic breakout. So those who are 70 and older, it wasn't 54% who said neither. It wasn't just a little over half. It was 3 out of 4 saying they're the most resistant to any additional communication. Those that are most open are in their 40s. So this is, again, if you're looking to put your message where people are welcoming it, that's also a group that are strong with a prospective donors. That is, they're of the mindset that they want to put a planned gift in place, but they've not executed. And look, a majority of them are open to additional contact. That means that just seems to be a good opportunity. One of the things we're always interested in is to take a look at what charities are devoting a lot of intense ways of cultivating large donors. So we were curious about how many people are members of a donor recognition club. And this could be a prospect, and this could be someone who already has a planned gift in place. 14% of our sample said, in fact, they were currently a member of a donor recognition club. More interesting was whether there was a large group of people who were interested in becoming a member of a donor recognition club. Would you like to be invited to be a member? And of those who aren't already a member, 96% said no thank you. 3% said yes. And this is maybe another one of those demoralizing findings, but I think that you have to understand what this is conveying about legacy societies. And truly, we could have done a whole study about legacy societies now that we know what this finding is saying, that just on the surface of how we described it, and we described it as being a member of a donor recognition club, there's not a lot of envy out there for people who aren't already members of that group. And it could be they don't know what that might mean for them. It could be that they're happy with their status the way it is, and they're connecting in the way that they want. But it certainly invites the question of what could nonprofits be doing besides legacy clubs that would be of interest and be a way to engage. It certainly raises that question. We were curious about just, is there an opportunity to build communities of donors? And just on initial first blush, just 10% are saying, yeah, I would like to feel more a part of a community with the people who also support, as I do, the nonprofits that I am planning to make a planned gift with. That may seem a little bit low, but I'm going to come back to it in a second. Facebook, LinkedIn, social media are these vehicles that give a potential to build community. So how many people are already active on these sites? And you can see that 55%, 53% are already engaging with social media, so that makes it a ripe opportunity. And that in terms of would you be interested in getting updates from the charities that you support through sites like this, you can see that there is some opportunity. There's expectation that these things are just getting started. But again, it's people in their 40s that are showing more interest in connecting via Facebook than some of these others. Messaging. We're interested in understanding how language affects people's decisions to make a planned gift to charity. So we tested, is this something that would strongly influence your decision to put a planned gift in place? And I'm going to walk through about a dozen of these in their rank order. So the best performing message, with 66% saying this would strongly influence my decision to make a planned gift, is language that says charitable gifts make the world a better place. And what that says is that this is sort of the psychological mindset that people want to feel fulfilled. as they're thinking what's motivating them to do it. And that's higher. That's 10 points higher than giving to a nonprofit, giving to charity makes people feel good. But you can see there's really, the top of our list, emotional reasons for giving. Our second tier are in the 40% range, that you can direct donations to specific causes. Again, another emotional thing, that you get more back than you give when you give to charity. That it's a good way to connect with a like-minded community. And remember I said I would come back to, can you build a community of like-minded people through your charities? And on first blush, just sort of saying, do you want to be part of that community, there wasn't a lot of eagerness to jump in and say yes. But asked if this would strongly influence your decision, that giving to charity is a good way to connect with a like-minded community, here's a 40% number. And it could be that it grew on them as we sort of went through the questionnaire, and it could be that there's something about the way we phrased it here that ended up working a little bit better. But it says to me that there's more opportunity than we first measured potentially there. So messages that get in the 30% range, that giving reduces the need for government to help the needy, that it's wise not to give heirs enough to do nothing. Again, these are much lower than our 66% message that was the top of the list, or that people have an obligation to give. That donors to charity are admired, 20% say that would strongly influence their decision. And the least, the message that draws the least, saying it would strongly influence their decision, is this is a good way to pay less in taxes. And that's not to say that that wouldn't be part of any decision that people would make. It's just saying that there are emotional messages that sort of get them moving in a stronger, more impactful way than the mechanics of it getting done in terms of what you would lead with. So this is just a summary of all of those, and you can see how high it goes from the 66% at the top down to 17% at the bottom. What we think this is useful for is lead with your strongest messaging. It isn't to exclude everything else, because all of that is affecting some people. And it may be that the people who said it's a good way to pay less in taxes aren't at all interested in making the world a better place. It's not that you want to leave out those messaging. It just tells you how to structure the message so that you hit the most people, get the most bang with messages that have more impact. So I'm about to turn this over to Bev to talk a little bit more about it. I just want to sum up by saying that this research is a lot like other research that we do, in that there's really 3 stages to it. The first stage is gathering data, and we want to be sure that we are focusing on gathering the best quality data, that what we take a look at here is reflective of a cross-section of planned givers and people who intend to be a planned giver. The second step is turning data into knowledge. What did we learn? What do we now know that we didn't know before? Because just looking at numbers on a piece of paper, the numbers don't speak for themselves. So adding sort of some context, helping figure out what do we know, what did we learn. And the third step is turning knowledge into wisdom. And that's not something Seltzer & Company can do on our own. I mean, we have some experience with nonprofits, but this is where Stelter brings a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of history of taking a look at things. So I'm going to turn that over to Bev. But just by way of a final reminder, it takes your knowledge and your wisdom as well, because nobody knows your nonprofit as well as you. And not every one of the things that we talked about here represents your specific population of givers, but it gives us a sense of the community of givers overall, and we hope you found that this was worthwhile. Bev?
Thanks, Anne. This is Bev Hutney jumping back in here. So post-data dump here, you're probably asking yourself, well, now what? And the fact of the matter is that no study can give us a blueprint of what exactly we should do to ensure success. As much as I would love to be able to take numbers and put them into a formula and predict exactly how our donors are going to behave, that's not going to happen. And the survey wasn't designed to do that. What it does provide us is this insight into the donor's attitude and their frame of mind and their receptivity and what we should lead with. So what I'm going to leave you with today and really sort of start the discussion on our Stelter's 5 broad takeaways, our recommendations, and they're really just starting points to get you thinking about what this information could mean for you and what you're currently doing. And as Ann said, you know, if I were you and I wanted to try to turn this knowledge into wisdom, I would just take a moment to honestly reflect on how does this information stack up against your own donor base and the approaches that you're currently taking. And at the same time, I would caution you not to overthink it. You know, let's not panic. I think if you're tuned into your donor base, a lot of these decisions will be a bit intuitive. And so to start out, to really look at our first thing that we suggest you think about is that it's clear to us, now this being our third national piece of research, that it's important to begin communicating with supporters by the time they're middle-aged. If 72% of our best prospects are under age 60, we better start communicating with them now. So if you're not doing that, let's certainly consider it, knowing that not every donor at any age is equal, and none of us have unlimited budget to mail to everyone or to email everyone or to visit everyone. So to the extent that you can combine age with passion to narrow that selection, I think you'll probably have your best bet, just knowing that affinity, their affinity for you, their engagement with you really trumps everything in your selection criteria. So it's looking at people that have done things like gone the extra effort. Do they volunteer for you? Do they give you more information than average? Do they give you their email address? Do they come at you through different channels, online, direct mail? Do they complete surveys that you send out to them? And at the same time, so that's looking at the best prospects, the new folks. But at the same time, you certainly can't discontinue mailing to the people that you're already mailing to, the older donors or maybe your more traditional group. We just need to be strategic in that approach and strategic in where we spend our dollars. So that would be broad strokes recommendation number 1. Number 2, we suggest that you start to focus those messages on people regardless of giving history. Again, the loyalty model seems to be relevant. You know, your most loyal annual givers are, yes, a large portion of people who make planned gifts, most likely. But let's reach out now to that wider group. And we've gotten a lot of questions from people about how do you do that. And I think it's recognizing that you can start introducing the planned giving message much earlier in the donor life cycle or in the audience life cycle. So for example, the things that you're already doing, the magazine that maybe you deliver to your constituency, the information that you have in your special event program books, or your very early communications with people. This information seems to suggest to me that it's never too early to start. But there doesn't need to be this sort of progression from, oh, I give you $10 and then $100 and $250 and then, oh, now because you're at that level of giving and you're 65, I'm going to start the planned giving message. There are ways that this seems to suggest that we can start sooner and then certainly look at the people who have the most affinity for what you're doing. Our third recommendation would be to harness the influence of family. So traditional consumer marketers have known for a long time, for example, that women, moms, make the majority of purchasing decisions in a household. And teenagers and children have great influence over their parents about the kind of food that shows up in the cupboard and the kinds of things that they buy. And our closest friends, you know, my closest friends, the family I choose, so to speak, really play heavily into how I spend my time and the things that I like to do and where I spend my money. And so we, too, as planned giving marketers, need to realize that that influence is at work in the donations that we try to realize. And so let's tap into that network. And one of the obvious ways to do that clearly is through social media, which by its very nature is designed to tap into a person's network and to tap into their influencers. And we can spend a whole day here just talking about social media in general, and Stelter will certainly come back with some separate sessions on that in particular. But I think it's worth noting when we talk about social media that when we do go there as a nonprofit, it's certainly important to honor the nature of social media, which is that it's a two-way conversation. It's less of a push, less of a sell. And here is where, in my opinion, nonprofits have a tremendous advantage in that the best part of social media is about telling stories, and it's about celebrating, and it's about fun, and it's about being playful. And if we have nothing else to tell as a nonprofit, we have amazing, amazing stories. So that would be a fantastic place to start. And then from a more practical perspective, how can we present opportunities, events for people to bring in friends and family? How can we create materials that are supportive of those relationships? Fourth, we would recommend that to the extent that you can, you take a look at those singles. They popped out for us because they are this rising demographic in terms of best prospects. And they're also saying, you know what, I really don't get quite as fantastic as attention as some of the other demographic groups. And so because of that mismatch, we think that they are certainly people worth looking at. I will throw it out to the blogosphere, really, to help us understand better how to do that. You know, it's difficult. There may be data mining services that allow you to find singles. You know, I don't know. That was data mining services, not dating services, to help you find singles. But there's certainly a group that we can see opportunity in. And even then, we're not saying that you should abandon the group that you're currently working with. We're simply saying that this data is showing that there are other areas of gold, that we need to go there, and that there's an opportunity for productivity in the future. And then finally, this question of legacy societies and ongoing stewardship. And frankly, this is the piece of the research that has gotten the most attention of any in our survey. And it's, as Ann said, could be a topic, a survey in and of itself. Here at Stelter, we're not knocking legacy societies by any stretch. But in practice, we see that a fraction of donors get really fired up about them. We send millions of emails a year on behalf of nonprofits. We put hundreds of thousands of millions of pieces of direct mail in the mail stream. And many of those say things like, join our legacy society. You know, we often lead with that. It's sort of the default way to do it. And it rarely resonates. We don't see it resonating. And so coupled with Ann's insights on this, we think that there seems to be an opportunity to refresh the approach. Is it the nomenclature? Is it the words that we're using? Is it society? Is it legacy? What is it that is not resonating? And how can we engage a wider circle of your most passionate supporters and develop stewardship techniques that really are going to resonate with this next generation that's coming right at us? And, you know, I think back to, you know, the Yellow Wristband Live Strong campaign, which I know based on recent events is you know, there's a story there, recent developments aside. But that was an amazing movement because you had people who were clamoring to get that yellow wristband or clamoring to put on a pink ribbon or a red ribbon. And you saw them in the most unlikely of places. You know, somebody you would never think, you know, just, oh, they got the yellow wristband on. Well, that was a tremendous example of people clamoring to be part of a momentum, a movement. And so how can we do that? Because we know that people care about the work that we do as nonprofits, and how do we find a way to really put a fire into that group? So that is where I'm going to leave you today. There are some great people out in the blogosphere. I'd refer you to Phyllis Friedman, the Plain Giving blogger. She's done a whole series of blogs with this research and with practical ideas on what you can do I would encourage you to reach out to each other, and we're excited about launching this conversation and trying some of these ideas out in practice in the work that we do. So with that, we are going to open this up for questions.
Thanks, Bev. This is Jen, and the time now is time to answer some questions. We have a couple coming in. I want to just remind you guys again how you can do that. You have a questions pane in your control panel of your tools area. You just go ahead and type your question in and hit submit, and we see it here, and we'll address as many as we can. Off the top, I just wanted to address the most common question that we've received so far throughout the presentation, and that is, do we get the slides? Anne presented a great deal of data, some great charts, we laid it out really well and clear, and I know you all want to get your hands on that, and the answer is yes. We will be providing you with the slides. Look for them to be on our website by Monday. We'll have the slides as well as the recording of today's webinar that you'll be able to access both of those things. You'll also get an email probably tomorrow or the next day that just reminds you that where you can get those at and gives you the link. So with that, we'll go ahead and start answering some of the questions here. I think there's been a couple questions on if you broke out your findings by gender, and maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think what is helpful to know is that there's no real difference between people who have already executed a planned gift and prospective planned givers by way of their male-female composition. It's 54-46 female for current planned givers, 56-44 for prospects. So statistically, just pretty close. It tilts a bit more toward women, but not lopsidedly so.
And Bev, you just mentioned a blogger that has been giving some great recommendations lately, and we had some people miss that. Could you just repeat that information?
Sure. So we'll put this address at the end of the slides when we send them out. But the name of the blogger is Phyllis Friedman, and it's we're looking right now for her address. I subscribe to it. So it's the Phyllis Friedman blog. We'll put the end of it at the slides when we send them out so that you can get them. The Planned Giving Blogger is the title of her blog. Do a Google search for that and you'll find it.
Great. Thank you, Beth. We're just reading through some of the questions here.
There's a question here about what to do if you do not have data regarding age of donors. There are services that you can purchase that will provide an overlay to your database that will provide you with age data. Stelter can help you out with that. There's a number of resources for that. If that's not something that you can afford to provide or to do, I would suggest that you look at people who show engagement. Again, go back to that. Who are the folks that seem to be responding either through volunteering or, I mean, literally they friended you on Facebook as, your organization. If any way they did one step more to engage with you, I would start with those groups. There's a question here about legacy societies again, which is, have you seen or worked with legacy societies that have refreshed their images and their reasons for joining so that they're more attractive to donors? And one of the organizations that I work with is one that it's a medical organization, a research hospital, and they do a program that where they bring in experts. They know that people give to them because they're research-based and they're doing a lot of innovative work in the medical field. And so the way in which they bring in and steward their most engaged groups is by providing them access to those individuals. It's a very, it's an academic sort of thing, but that's what resonates with their donor base. And they do like a quarterly speech, they provide lunch, that sort of thing, but you wouldn't have to. And they use that as a way to, they find that it's one of their best resources for finding people who have given planned gifts. So again, if the Legacy Society is about, I'm here to honor you and we're going to have dinner and it's going to be a one-time-a-year special thing, that's one way of doing it. Or is it saying, you know what, I'm going to have this event where I provide to you something that represents sort of the heart and soul of what matters about the work that you appreciate in us, and invite a wider circle of people to it. Another quick idea on that, these things don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be expensive. I spoke with a gentleman the other day who said he worked at a private, like a prep school. And the notion was that the best donors needed to be invited to some big special event and that sort of thing. Well, what he suggested doing was just inviting that donor to have lunch in the school cafeteria. And we know that's not expensive. But how special is that? That's just sort of a way of bringing people in. So think about things that you can do, but really connect them more to the heart of your mission versus, the fundraiser that they go to all the time.
There was a question, I'll chime in here, about whether there are anything that we can learn by income. And we took a look at the messages and how those resonate by income groups. And I'll just give you 4 things very quickly. The upper income groups, so people who reported $100,000 a year or more, were more likely to say that our top message, gifts to charity make the world a better place, would be a strong influencer on them. They were also more likely to endorse the messaging of people have an obligation to support charities. There are 2 messages that work better than average for lower income donors, and one is giving to charity makes people feel good, and the other was that people admire donors who give to charities. So again, some of those emotional things, you can hear maybe a little bit of a tweak in the difference of how they respond versus how that works by income.
There's a couple of questions here around age and how you go after people of different ages. I see one that says, okay, my average donors said I market to 72-year-olds. That's my group. I have a very limited donor population under 60. So what do I do with that older group? There is a piece of research that we did just a few years back that you can download from our website around trying to understand how to uncrack the nut of the older donor, and we looked at some of the things that older donors spark to in terms of giving and reasons why they don't give. And for them, the biggest roadblock was that they intended to leave money for friends and family. And so there's some insight in that around how you address that with them, knowing that it's important for them to feel that family's taken care of, and to the extent that you can say, you know what, it's possible, these aren't mutually exclusive ideas. You can take care of friends and family and help us as well. So I would lead you back to the website on that.
I think there's a question here about how much, I'll see if I can find it. I thought I had it right here in hand. Oh, here it is. About whether there's messaging for people, whether people have the idea that planned gifts are just for the rich. We asked a question in our survey that says, do you think there's a minimum number of dollars required to make a planned gift? Not that it would be a formal rule, but any thought you might have about whether a gift needs to be of a certain size to make a gift worthwhile. And 1% said a planned gift would need to be $1 million or more. 2% said it would need to be $100,000 or more. 8% said it would need to be at least $1,000, and 82% said any amount is worthwhile. So I think, we wanted to get a sense of whether, again, this is sort of, we were looking at nomenclature, but also looking at the concept of planned giving, and is there something about it that is elitist? And I think this is a pretty strong answer that says it's okay to ask for a planned gift of any size, that it isn't that this population has an expectation that you can only do it if it's a huge amount of money.
We have a question here. How do you engage the entire family in the decision process of giving in general and for planned gifts in particular? And, again, social media is an opportunity to continue to help educate the individual donor and then their circle of influence around planned giving. And there are also materials available, the sort of will planning books the workbooks, kind of the fundamentals of putting an estate plan together, which are instructional and have, throughout that process, you really can involve family. And then we know that planned giving is a, sort of the offshoot of the estate planning process. So that the estate planning process is certainly something that is very likely to involve family and an opportunity to do that.
And we have a question about the term planned giving, and I think we do have some research on that.
Yeah, one of the things that we asked as we were qualifying people to participate in the survey, we thought we probably needed to step into the concept of planned giving. So one question we asked very directly, are you familiar with the term planned giving? And of people who have a current gift in place, interesting, 50% said that they were. I'm sorry, this is prospects as well as people who have one in place. 50% said yes, 49% said no. Nationally, because we kept this kind of contact information of everybody we talked to, regardless of whether they qualified to take the whole survey, 34%. So 1 out of 3 said they were familiar with that language. We then went on to explain what we meant by that language before we qualified them to participate, saying that they had already put a planned gift in place or that this was something they would definitely or probably do. So that language we're finding is not universal, and so we felt the need to explain for that.
There's a question here around the tax changes coming in 2013. Will the tax advantages be more of an influence? We certainly didn't poll on that question. Don't think that the data really can give us an incredible amount of insight into that around tax law changes. Stelter will, however, be doing a webinar upcoming once the tax situation settles into place with some of our advisory board, and we can speak directly to that question.
There's a question about the education level of the people in our survey. And let's see, I think I have that right here. There's not a huge difference between current planned givers and prospective givers, and really not as much difference as you might think with the general population. So people who currently have planned gifts in place, 25% report that they have no more than a high school education, 22% say that they have some college but less than a degree, 24% have a college degree, and 22% say they've done some postgraduate work or have a postgraduate degree. And that profile looks very similar to the national profile on education, and there's very little difference looking at current givers versus prospects on that. Obviously, that profile would be different given what your charity does. So if you are an advanced education institution, your profile might look different than that.
Thanks, Anna. We have a question asking about repeat planned givers. The results of the survey indicated an overwhelming majority would not be repeat planned givers. Given that the majority of planned gifts are requests, is there any delineation of life income agreements versus estate plan gifts? Do you have any thoughts on that, Anna or Beth?
We did poll on what types of gifts were, if you had a planned gift in place, we asked what type of gift was it. We have some information on that. I believe it's in the report, and obviously a gift in the will was most common. The other options that we provided were a charitable trust, charitable gift annuity and life insurance policy or retirement account. And there were some, and the majority again was the gift in the will, followed by beneficiary of a life insurance policy, gift annuity, and then the trust. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly. Okay, we just have a couple minutes left. We'll just look through these and try to answer one or two more.
You know, I'll just mention that there's a question about whether there's a relationship between annual fund giving and planned giving. And the very first survey that we did in 2004, we took a look at annual giving as part of it. It was just a broader survey. This survey focuses very specifically in just on people who've put a planned gift in place and wanting to understand those mechanisms. But, you know, we're always interested in what are the next questions to be answered? What more do we want to know? So I think you can take a look at previous research, which I think is on the Stelter site, for what it said about annual giving, and it's something that we'll be thinking about in the future.
Okay, thank you, Ann, and thank you, Bev. We are running out of time here, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. We'll go ahead and move on. I just had a couple things I wanted to let you know. I'm going to ask Ann to go ahead and mute her phone. I'm afraid we're getting some feedback. Thank you. So I did want to let you know again that you are asking, a lot of people are asking about accessing the PowerPoint handouts. We will have those available on our website along with the recording of today's webinar. There's the address that you can find it at. It'll definitely be up there by Monday, and we will send you an email that will let you know, again, when it's posted and where you can find it. Now, if you would like to get to know the Stelter Company better, we invite you to join us. We've got some different social media outlets we use. Of course, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can follow us, friend us, join us on those. If you'd like to get to know more about us, visit our website at stelter.com. And if you have any questions on our products or our services, you can send us an email at stella@stelter.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your participation in our webinar. Have a nice afternoon.